Well, hello there. My name is Alexis Jackson, as you can see from the bottom of this lovely slide, and I'm going to be talking to you today about genetically modified organisms, particularly plants and crops. So, what are genetically modified organisms? I mean, that phrase alone terrifies people. Genetically modified. Well, it's an organism whose genome has been engineered in a lab in order to favor the expression of desired physiological traits or the generation or creation of desired biological products. Doesn't have to be that scary. Now, the most prominent species alterations that we see are going to be plants and crops, like I've already mentioned, animals, which are usually your farm animals, and soil bacteria. Now, there are three types of genetic modification that is typical for crops. That's going to be your traditional crop modification, which consists of selective breeding and crossbreeding. This method has been around for 10,000 plus years and it's been pretty effective. Now, selective breeding is when we take two parents that have particular characteristics that we're interested in and we breed them together to produce offspring that are going to have a more desirable characteristic. So, for instance, plants. We can take two plants that have a decent height that we're hoping to have an overall higher height. So, we're going to take these two parents that have the characteristics that we're looking for, put them together, and we're going to ultimately produce the offspring that are going to have an overall height change. Now, crossbreeding is much like it sounds, crossbreeding. We're going to take the cross of either closely or distantly related individuals, which in this aspect would be crops or plants, and we're going to produce a new variety of said crop or plant. And this line is going to continue forward, experiencing and exhibiting these desired characteristics. Now, our next form is genetic engineering. This has been around since the 1970s and consistently used since then. Now, genetic engineering is the copying of a gene with a desired trait from one organism. We take it from said organism and transfer it into something completely different, which by something I mean a different organism. Now, for example, bovine growth hormone. Most are familiar with this bovine cattle, so the growth hormone from cattle. This has actually been taken via this method of genetic engineering and transferred into fish. Think about it. We've got a lot of people to feed, and how long does it take for a typical fish to grow? So, by using this bovine growth hormone, these fish are growing at an exponential rate compared to what would be their natural growth rate. Get a lot more food a lot faster. Now, last but not least, we've got genome editing, which everybody should be familiar with at this point. CRISPR, anyone? Now, this method for crop and plant modification has been around since 2013, and CRISPR Cas9 has been used. Now, you got to think with CRISPR, what happens? Well, we're going to have a more precise and targeted way to develop new crops because we're going to be able to target these specific genes in these specific locations to make these changes, which ultimately is going to mean that we're going to have a more efficient and easier method of food source than we would the traditional way. Because you have to think the traditional method, it's wonderful, but at the same time, it's going to take a lot longer. Because in doing so, you're going to have to take the cross or the selective breed, you're going to have to wait because you're going to have to plant, develop the offspring, and see what happens. Now, if it doesn't work out, we got to try again. If we try again, maybe we have to wait till another season because a lot of crops are seasonal. They can't just be planted at any old time that we feel like planting them. I mean, you could, but you're not going to get anything. Now, with genome editing, you try, you fail, try again. There is no seasonal wait. So it means that we get what we need a lot faster. So, common types of GM crops that you're going to see at the grocery store on a regular old Tuesday are going to be a lot of things you're familiar with. So, corn, soybeans, cotton, potatoes, papaya fruit. We've got summer squash, canola, which we use for canola oil. We've got alfalfa, which is a type of hay. A lot of people use it to put in for their dog beds if you've got outdoor dogs. We've got apples and even sugar beets. Now, crops that have been genetically modified got a pretty high rate out there of percent that we're planting and harvesting. So look at this in 2013. Now think about that, 2013. We started using CRISPR for GM modification in these plants and crops. Now in 2013, 95% of canola that we planted and harvested in the United States was genetically modified. 99.9% of sugar beets in 2013 were genetically modified. Now, 2018 to present, we're still sitting in the 90th plus percentile for our genetically modified produce. Soybeans are sitting at 94%, cotton steady 94%, and corn at 92%. So think about this. The majority of what we're consuming, that's out there in our produce is going to be genetically modified. Doesn't leave much range. I mean, look at this. You've got 6% natural, 80, or not 80, 8% natural. Up here, we've got 5%, and not even 1% for the sugar beets. Now, how are genetically modified crops regulated? It's a good question. Now, we've got 3 different government agencies that are in control of this on a regular basis. We've got our FDA, which is your US Food and Drug Administration. Their job is to ensure the safety and proper labeling of all plant-derived food and feed. Now, the EPA is the US Environmental Protection Agency. Their job is to regulate the sale, distribution, and use of pesticides in order to protect the health of humans and the environment. Now, the USDA, which is the Department of Agriculture, takes care of a lot, but in particular, when it comes to GM produce, it's going to be the APHIS division. Now, their job is to protect agriculture from pests and disease. They also regulate the oversight of products of modern biotech that could pose a risk to human health and safety. Now, I want you to think about this. Pests and disease. Well, what happens to our plants? Pests and disease kill them off. So what does that mean? We don't have food. Now, with GM modification, we can change that. We can change how these plants and crops protect themselves from these invaders that we know on a regular basis try to attack these individual species of plant and crop. That means that we're not going to have an issue with an undersupply. We're going to be able to keep a consistent supply rolling, or even an oversupply, so that we don't have to worry about people going hungry. Now, are GM crops safe to eat? Because that's a really big question out there, and some say yes and some say no. Now, in the yes category, we've got 20 plus years of monitoring of these GM crops and plants by multiple countries and researchers, scientists from all over the world. Now, many concerns and suspicions out there are tried and tested by these people in these countries, and they've been shown to really not have any issue. Which specifically people are worried about organ health, they're worried about their offspring and their own DNA. I mean, I get that. You're thinking, if I eat this GM food, is my kid or my grandkids going to develop tails? If I do it, am I going to grow a pair of flippers or some gills? You never know. Genetic modification, again, it can be a scary thing for people that aren't familiar. Now, in the yes category, though, we've seen that really genetically modified plants and crops aren't any more harmful than our traditionally grown crops. Now, 95% of our animals that feed us, our meat and our dairy, are fed a completely genetically modified diet. So think about it. You've probably been eating it a long time and not even knowing. Now, on the no category, we've got the Center for Food Safety. They seek to halt the approval, commercialization, and or release of any new GE crops because Congress has yet to actually put in place any federal laws and regulations regarding genetic modification when it comes to our food sources. Now, a number of studies have shown that GE crops can pose serious risks to farmers, consumers, domesticated animals, wildlife, and the environment. But again, that's can. This is why we have the FDA and the EPA and the USDA to help regulate these different things to make sure that we don't have the issues that we have. Well, not have, could have. Now, like I said again, there's no federal laws governing GM foods at this time. What you think? Should we eat it? Should we not eat it? You be the judge.